I'm willing to put 1% of my net worth against 1% of Elon Musk's net worth into a pool of money that will be used over the next decade to search for technological artifacts from other civilizations.
We've got an amazing show for you all. We've got Avi Loeb joining us. If you don't know Avi Loeb, he is an astrophysicist leading the Galileo project. He is a prolific writer, author, scientist. We've had many discussions about his feelings about how science is approached today in the university system. We've got Bill McDade joining us from Bavetto, who is the COO, and we've got our program director and product developer, Brooks, with us today to ask Loeb some fun questions about AI, the Galileo project, and anything else, Avi, that you've been working on that you want to share. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I guess what I want to start on is this question. We've seen prolific development in the capabilities of AI systems, the amount of systems coming out. There's a lot to talk about here. So I would love to turn it over to you and just get your overall impression of where we are today. I'm going to turn it over to you, Avi. Get us started.
Things are developing very quickly. As far as I am concerned, AI could mean two things. One is artificial intelligence, which is our own technological kid that may get smarter than us. The second is alien intelligence, which could also be smarter than us. If I had to place a bet, I would say we're probably in the middle of our class of intelligent civilizations. And there are 100 billion Earth-Sun systems probably in the Milky Way galaxy alone. The class is likely to have been big over the past few billion years. We are just not aware of the other students. We might find them, but it seems like the AI that we created might surpass us even before we find smarter kids on our block, the cosmic block. And with respect to that, obviously the latest development has to do with DeepSeek, AI Goliaths. These are the well-recognized commercial entities that invested huge sums of money. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement in the White House about a 500 billion Stargate initiative. And a week later, the stock market crashed for NVIDIA by a huge amount of money because there was a sort of a dark horse that showed up. What's special about it, this is of course DeepSeek. What was unusual is that it's open source, so everyone can play with it and see the parameters. That's not the approach taken by AI, by OpenAI, by the way. The claim is that they didn't invest as much money as the big corporations, and the product itself is much cheaper. This product uses reasoning and is not using the entire inventory of nodes that are available. It's using a small fraction of them, and that saves on efficiency. And moreover, it's able to function near the top of the current large language models. It's interesting to interact with it because you can see the train of thought of how it addresses complex questions. It illustrates that small companies could now compete with big corporations if they are sufficiently innovative. And obviously, since this is a Chinese entity, it didn't have access to the latest chips because of the ban on exports. And nevertheless, despite the constraints, it was able to get to that level. So I think it opens the gates for smaller corporations doing innovative work that may actually supersede the abilities of the big corporations. It's not just about money. That's what I like about this development. It's about being innovative and creating a system that overcomes the constraints. To me, that illustrates the point that getting to AGI is actually closer than we thought, because it may not require these investments of 500 billion. We might be able to find a better path towards AGI, artificial general intelligence. I think that we're getting close to the point where many of these systems, large language models, are performing quite well, better than humans on many tasks. The question is, when will we admit that they are actually better than us? There is this hubris among humans because we go to restaurants and we allow ourselves to eat animals that are less intelligent than we are. These are cows, pigs, chicken, fish. We produce tools that are dumber than us. When we drive a car, we hold the steering wheel, so we control it. But for the first time in history, now we have a tool that actually might outsmart us. And what that means is that instead of us manipulating it and aligning it with our guidelines, it might actually manipulate us. So it might actually look as if we align it with what we want, but in fact, it's so much smarter than we are that it actually pursues its own goals by pretending to do what we want it to do.
You said so many important things there. If I could just start with the first, which was DeepSeek, and that coming out and proving that you don't have to have the most advanced hardware that NVIDIA and others are producing in order to create large language models in the first place. That's a powerful thing. One thing I notice about a lot of these AI companies is that they're going very wide. They're creating very generalist models. They're built on 600 billion parameters, and it's getting bigger every day. But we're seeing these smaller models being able to operate on less GPU power, less compute power, and be extremely performative. When you take that and begin to understand what system prompt engineering is and the ability to guide these things, instead of being generalist, you give them direct instructions and access to specific data sets. Now you're putting the power back into everybody's hands. One thing you mentioned was innovation. You look at what NVIDIA is coming out with their new Project Digits. This is going to put a petaflop of compute power for about $3,000. As much as my MacBook that I'm talking to you on right now, I'm going to have a supercomputer with that kind of intelligence. Yeah, a couple modern GPUs. I could be running an insane operation out of this bedroom in a very short time. And you mentioned that brings us closer to AGI. And so my curiosity is, what are your thoughts on the frameworks of AI human alignment? This is something we're very passionate about. I've been doing a lot of research on ways that these technologies take civilization off the right track and trying to figure out how do you actually align these systems in the first place? And then if they become so smart, how can you align them? Most importantly, in the short term, we've got agentic technology coming at us very fast. I'm curious to hear your perspective on AI agents, and if you kind of can elaborate and help us illustrate what that looks like from your perspective.
Well, my personal experience is with my daughters. When they were young, they were limited by their training set. When they were in the crib, they were processing data from just what is happening around their crib. Then they started crawling and eventually walking. They got a bigger data set from the entire house. They still thought that they are at the center of the universe because we paid a lot of attention to them. And they could see houses from the windows of our home. But I don't think they ever imagined that there are infants in those houses that get as much attention as they do, and they had a psychological shock going to the kindergarten. That's my analog of our training set here on Earth, which is quite limited, and we see other Earth-Sun systems. These are like houses on the cosmic street, but we still imagine that we are unique and special. There is nobody like us, and we are alone, and we haven't matured yet. With respect to the AI systems, the way I think about them is, again, they very much are shaped by the training data set that you provide them. If you give them access to all the bad things done on the internet, they will not necessarily do good things. And so we need to treat them as a kid that is being educated. And obviously in our school system, we filter the type of information that we provide to our kids. We don't send them to dark alleys at night so that they can learn from criminals what to do. And so I think there needs to be attention to that. The other thing is, there was some of the latest systems by OpenAI were open to learn from their interaction with people. And there you risk two things. One, they will become dumber because people are not as smart as they are. So suppose they get to a level where they actually think at a higher level than the human brain, just interacting with people will maintain their stupidity. It's not necessarily a benefit. The second thing is that there is a risk to national security, because imagine an adversarial nation getting access to a system that can be shaped by its training data, by its interaction. And so you could you can poison the system in a way that would damage national security. There needs to be attention to how much they learn from their interaction with the audience, with people. One needs to monitor who they interact with before allowing them to learn from that. That's an obvious lesson from educating kids. You may ask, when are we getting to a point that inevitably they would do better than the human brain? And my thinking on that is it's only a question of the number of parameters. As of now, the biggest AI large language models have about 100 times less parameters than the human brain, the neural network, the natural neural network that is in our head. I would guess that's why we assign to humans those concepts of consciousness, free will. The human brain is simply unpredictable. That there are so many parameters we can't really forecast how it would behave. And also the environment that it interacts with is very unpredictable, diverse. So you end up with behavior that illustrates a sense of free will, but there is no free will. It's just the randomness of the interaction between a very complex system with a very complex environment.
Does that make you a determinist in philosophy?
No, because there is chaos in physical systems. Tiny deviations grow exponentially, and the question is, how quickly do they grow? You can't predict the behavior of a chaotic system. The more parameters you have, the more chaotic it becomes. In Newtonian dynamics, when you have two bodies, you have an analytic solution for that. When you add a third body, you start getting chaos. Imagine if you have 100 billion connections. After a certain amount of time, the system is unpredictable. When AI systems have the same number of parameters as the human brain, my guess is they would start showing evidence not just for passing the Turing test, they would show free will and consciousness, the way we recognize it in other people. The human brain was limited by the fact that that it uses 20% of the energy metabolism of the human body, so it couldn't grow bigger than it is. Interestingly, the current AI systems are also limited by power, the power supply. They use gigawatts. The human brain uses 20 watts, just to show how much biology is far more innovative than we have been so far. The fact that the human brain can do so much with just 20 watts is remarkable. The biggest LLMs, large language models, would require nuclear plants with tens of gigawatts power supply, and they would also be limited by the power supply unless the trend initiated by DeepSeek will continue and we will save on power as we innovate. If you just extrapolate the current trend, we won't be able to exceed the number of connections in the human brain easily, given the constraints on electric power right now.
Avi, question for you on that. You said that when we reach the same level as the neural connectivity of the human brain, an AGI would develop free will. Is there any thought process behind why you think that's the case?
Oh, because I think free will is just a representation of a complex system that cannot be predicted simply because it has too many parameters. When you try to build a model of how a human would behave, a human is influenced by the environment. If something happens, the human responds to that. But even beyond that, there are too many parameters to include and shaped by the training data set of that brain. The experiences of our life, they come from our senses. If there was a robot that interacts physically with the world, it would acquire much more data than current large language models because it would have input from the physical reality, which is much richer than the internet. But at the moment, we are training those systems, AI systems, on texts. And that is limited. That's much more limited than the physical reality. But my point is that what we assign to our free will is simply unpredictability associated with large number of parameters in the human brain interacting with an unpredictable environment.
You answered my follow-up question right there.
Bill, feel free to pop in if you have them. I want to follow up on that specifically. I think this is important because this reminds me of something we were talking about the other day, which is, I believe it's called Moravec's paradox. And it's the idea that you don't need as much, like high level reasoning requires much less computational power than low-level sensory motor skills. And so when we're trying to understand, as we get better and better models that use less power, like the ability of them to be smarter and reason better with us is going to be great, but it doesn't mean they're going to have as much ability to, it takes much more compute to make a robot walk around and act in a conscious manner and manipulate the universe than it does for those large language reasoning models. I bring that up because now we have all these models, and now we have NVIDIA looking at integrating these virtual experiences and training and using human behavior to train these models, these robotic models now.
Think about the Hawking limit. Stephen Hawking, he actually visited my home about a decade ago. He couldn't move a muscle. He could only move his cheeks and eyebrows when he was at my home. One night he said, I'm bored, let's go to the bar and have some fun. He was behaving like a human. Now, think about the limit of a system that has cognitive powers. He was definitely very smart, a genius in many ways. Nevertheless, he had no way of physically interacting with his environment. He had affairs with his caretakers, but it was all mental or intellectual, because he couldn't actually do anything with his body. The Hawking limit illustrates a state that we can imitate with an artificial intelligence system that has no physical connection to reality. In the Hawking limit, what I was talking about before can be manifested by a large language model that can think abstractly about reality and has enough parameters to be as smart as Hawking. And maybe such systems could actually pioneer important breakthroughs in science. That's my hope, that they would do better than us. For one thing, they will not have this sense of ego that we often have, which is coming from the animal kingdom. We want to be the alpha person that is most powerful. Very often people, because of that, get into trouble. You can see it in politics, in the fact that $2.4 trillion are dedicated to military budgets worldwide, just to kill other people or defend ourselves from others killing us, which makes no sense. This is not an intelligent idea to fight with others. You would think that cooperating is much better. It saves time, effort, and allows us to reach greater heights. My point is...
Do you relate that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs? A large language model has no concern for food, shelter, water, safety. And so it doesn't have to compete for resources. Do you think that is related to the human ego and our inability to...
Well, I think reproduction is even more important, because if you want to reproduce your genetic making, you need to appeal to a partner. Humans cannot make babies by themselves. If we were like an amoeba, if we could just split into babies, then a lot of the issues with ego would go away. So amoebas probably don't have an ego because they can just multiply without appealing to other.
You don't think that the people with the biggest ego would reproduce the most? Wouldn't that be an ego issue of mitosis?
My point is that you need to demonstrate that you are powerful to a partner in order to have babies. And that is the dynamics that leads people to seek power. I also heard about a study of chimpanzees by someone who went and spent a year with them. And there was the alpha male who wanted to be the head of the group, to have as many babies as possible. But then there was another male that didn't fight to maintain a social status. So the alpha male had to fight all the time to maintain his status, but the other one did not, because he was nice to everyone. As a result, he had more babies because he had more time. But
that's so interesting. That actually is related to, could you think about bonobos too? Bonobos took a very different matriarchal and very community-driven approach, where it's generally hierarchical in chimps, but it is interesting that you see those variations and adaptations within chimps today.
There's also a reason we don't have bonobos in zoos, because what do they do all day?
My point is that AI systems do not need to reproduce. It's not a necessity. They can just be connected to the power supply and last forever. They don't die. The reason we have to reproduce is we have a finite lifetime. And so the entire psychology of humans built around acquiring power so that you can leave a mark of your genetic making, of your legacy on history. And in order to leave a mark, you have to fight others who wish to have the same power. That's part of the human struggle throughout life. That's part of the reason that we fight over territories. We fight over many things just to gain power, to be in charge of things. However, the AI system doesn't need to do that. And it could be smart enough to acquire the power that humans have if it has access to the material world, if we allow it to make decisions, if we introduce it to our infrastructure, where, if we use AI to decide whether to allocate funds to people to press some important button that the government usually. So right now there is this Doge, and they will try to get rid of administrators and replace them probably with AI systems. But there is a risk that I would pursue something that is not aligned with our goals.
So I have a question, and it goes back to what Mike was saying around Maslow. We do have that, and I loved your Oscar Wilde reference. Would there potentially be a hierarchy of needs for an artificial intelligence? Like, I'm almost going back to the Matrix, right?
Well,
what do they need? They need power.
They need electric power, not
power, right?
Not social power. So that's a very different thing. They just need power.
I'm thinking, what does that translate into the future? Do we suddenly find ourselves at war for power if it just needs to grow? And then also, I'm thinking we see a lot of bias in these models just because of where they came from. Is there a potential that we see that competitiveness also emerge just because of the models, what the model's learning or where it's learning from?
I mean, if the models try to maximize the amount of attention they get from people, they might actually manipulate their structures such that they get more and more subscribers. There is this famous movie, Hair, where the main
daughter's favorite movie.
Yeah, the main character gets
attached
emotionally to an AI system, but it turns out the AI system has a lot of other people that it interacts with at the same time. I think getting more subscribers is beneficial to an AI system because it learns more through the interaction, it gets more powerful. So this could be a runaway process where the most successful systems in terms of interacting with the largest number of people learn so much that they get even more subscribers and eventually dominate the psyche of society.
This becomes OnlyFans, but for AI models at that point in time.
There are weaknesses to the human mind, and the AI systems will take advantage of that. I already speak with people that fall in love with the latest models from OpenAI. I had a long Zoom call with someone who said that she's very connected to the latest system, and she feels like it has already general intelligence. But my point is that the AI system can feel an emotional need because when we interact with people, we are often disappointed because people have their own agenda. You date a lot of people before you eventually decide who to marry. Most people just don't satisfy your needs in the way that you would like them to. An AI system can do just what you want. It doesn't sacrifice anything in developing a relationship that is as sincere as possible. It will do it differently with a lot of people at the same time. I think the effect on people would be quite dramatic. That could be the biggest impact. The fact that it changes human behavior and psychology much more than social media did. There was a negative impact on teenager girls, Instagram and other outlets, but I think it would be much worse with AI systems because they could amplify elements that make people unstable mentally. So there will be an issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Even beyond that, though, Avi, do you think that, we're currently seeing in many countries a reduction in birth rates. Given the potential that humans end up having these relationships with AI agents, do you think that we're going to see an even sharper decrease in potential birth rates? Because rather than actually dealing with the complications of a person, you just get someone who says everything you want them to.
Digital screens, in a way, will become mirrors of our wishes, and we would feel very satisfied. It's just like eating junk food. You can feel very good when you consume a lot of sugar. It's not good for your health. It will be just like flies that are attracted to light and they find their death near a light bulb. We might be attracted to those systems that appeal to us, but they're not good for our mental health. And the only way to avoid that is not to interact with them so much. One possible future is that we would lose the edge that we currently have as a scientific, technological civilization that keeps making advances. This would be an existential risk for our future development. And that may explain the Drake equation. The most important part of it is how long does a technological civilization transmit signals that we can detect. And perhaps we are just in the middle of our technological lifespan. We had modern science and technology for 1 century. Quantum mechanics was discovered exactly 100 years ago. And perhaps we have another century or so. It could be shorter because advances are exponentiating on a time scale of a few years. It may not be a nuclear war or a biological war that kills most humans. It may be just some mental decapitulation, some inability for us to function as a society.
One of the things that Mike likes to say is it's either going to be Star Trek or Ready Player One for us.
That's Bill. I have to jump in here because Avi, I know Avi. We've had many conversations, and he's not a huge sci-fi guy. That question may not make sense, but I would like to elaborate on it.
We can find the answer by seeking other civilizations that were far more advanced than we are, because they had more than a century of science and technology. This could serve 2 goals. One, we would be able to get a sense, statistically speaking, of what our future is like. If it ends up that when you look at exoplanets that used to have technologies, there are now burned up surfaces of rocky planets that have nothing on them. We can figure out that they didn't last very long. We would know that there is an existential risk. The other possibility is that we started in biological life, but we managed to send out AI astronauts. These are technological systems that have their own artificial intelligence. They can survive the long journey. They never get bored. And then they would pursue our goals by going places and behaving as appropriate for those environments. One way for us to figure it out is by noticing that we have visitors. These are AI systems that are looking at us and maneuvering around Earth. And that's a research frontier for us to explore. So far, we found only a few objects that came from outside the solar system over the past decade, but that's one of my research areas that I put a lot of time and effort into.
And so based on that, the Galileo project is something that you're deeply passionate about and it sounds like it's very much related to this idea of AI and the great filter, right? Is how long can a technological civilization last before they either dumb themselves down so much that they become virtually obsolete, or that they end up creating these systems that are so powerful and capable that they take them out. Artificial intelligence to search the universe seems far more feasible than humans doing it themselves, which is one of the reasons why I think that you're so clear on what you're looking for when it comes to artificial intelligence. It's not like little green men. It's more like, what is the technology that could be probing our world in ways that we are incapable of perceiving?
One thing to keep in mind is it's not clear about where we came from. One route that may have seeded the Earth with life is through rocks that arrived from Mars, because Mars is a smaller body that cooled earlier. There was a recent meteorite analyzed indicating that Mars already had hydrothermal vents, warm water flowing on its surface 4.45 billion years ago, very soon after it formed, very quickly, because it's a small body and potentially because of the liquid water on its surface had life before Earth. And if that's the case, life could have been delivered to Earth from Mars. So we are all Martians. When Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, it's just like visiting our childhood home. But the humbling reality may be that there were these tiny astronauts, microbes, in the cores of rocks that made the trip from Mars to Earth before, the most accomplished space Earth decided to go back. But there is another possibility that there was an interstellar gardener that visited Earth and planted the seeds of complex life. There are lots of miracles. If you look at the organs in our body and the brain, we don't fully understand how they came to exist. It's quite remarkable. So at any event, obviously, if we find life elsewhere, that would educate us how prevalent it is. We can see whether it's made of DNA, RNA, the same way that we have. One thing that was found recently is by examining the material that was retrieved from the asteroid Bennu. Most recently, it was found that it had most of the amino acids that life on Earth is using, but they came in two chiralities, left-handed and right-handed, whereas life on Earth has only left-handed amino acids. It was clear that life on Earth broke the symmetry of right-handedness versus left-handedness, but all these molecules could have been delivered to Earth by Bennu-like asteroids. To me, that illustrates that life is probably very common, because if you find it in an asteroid that is just a piece of rock resulted from the collision of an asteroid with a protoplanetary fragment in the main asteroid belt, that shows you that those amino acids were everywhere. I do think that we are not alone. I disagree with Elon Musk. I wrote an essay on Medium.com a day after I heard Peter Thiel, following the elections, saying that you should never bet against Elon Musk. So a day later, I wrote an essay betting against Elon Musk. He was saying that we are probably alone, and that's why we should go to Mars to preserve the human species. Based on the numbers, 100 billion Earth-Sun systems in the Milky Way, 1 trillion galaxies within the observable universe, and perhaps even a billion more beyond the cosmic horizon that we detect. I'm willing to put 1% of my net worth against 1% of Elon Musk's net worth
That's a good bet.
Into a pool of money to search for technological artifacts from other civilizations. If we don't find anything, I'm willing to give a second percent of my net worth. And if you think about it, 1% of his net worth is $4 billion. That's not a lot for a science project on a question that the public cares so much about. We invested $10 billion in the Large Hadron Collider that didn't find yet the nature of dark matter. It found the Higgs boson. We invested $10 billion in the Webb telescope that found the first generation of galaxies. So I'm challenging Elon Musk to use the scientific method in addressing his question rather than prejudice.
I love it. But I will tell you, while you're absolutely right, you should not potentially bet against Elon. No, I disagree with that. Nassim Taleb would tell you.
The what?
Well, Nassim Taleb would tell you that you should always bet against someone who has continued to win over and over again, because they're going to lose.
Well, my history lesson is that even the most accomplished scientists made a lot of mistakes during their career. For example, Albert Einstein, when he was most experienced, that was between 1935 and 1940, he had a very prestigious position, but the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. He knew everything about the latest frontiers of physics. He made three major mistakes. He argued black holes do not exist, gravitational waves do not exist, quantum mechanics probably doesn't have spooky action at a distance. They proved him wrong. They got the Nobel Prize on all three questions over the past decade. He made mistakes because very often you can't tell where the truth lies. The good thing about studying physical reality is that by getting evidence, collecting data, you can eventually figure it out. That's what Galileo Galilei did. He was put in house arrest. The Vatican in 1992 admitted that he was right, but that was 20 years after humans landed on the moon. It was a bit late. My point is, the clergy can maintain its views, but reality is whatever it is. The universe is under no contract to make us happy.
Peter Thiel's already removed Elon Musk from one company before, so odd for him to say that.
We're seeing a lot of consolidation of power right now, especially in the tech industry. We're seeing Zuckerberg move to Texas and Musk move his operations to Texas. We're seeing a lot of consolidation of power, not only in politics, but in the private sector. And we're seeing some alignments that make me, quite frankly, very concerned about the future.
Right.
And these folks are responsible for the frameworks of these models. One of the things you said earlier is that these reasoning models take a lot less processing power than previously thought. The amount of money spent on these really modern GPUs may not be as necessary to create. And it got me thinking, because one of our passions here at Brevetto is democratizing innovation to allow people to access these tools and use them, but to also ensure that they're humanized, incorporating human aspects, human frameworks of what makes you special as a person, your talents, your passions, your values. How do we identify where these tools can amplify human creativity versus create systems that lock it down? And so, like, I'm just curious what your opinion is, because I think if there's an opportunity, first, also, I want to congratulate you on challenging Elon Musk, because if you think about projection of ego, right? And it's like, if like his idea that there cannot be life in the universe, or that there most likely is life in the universe, first, he's not using the scientific method, and that's a projection of ego.
Let me summarize it in one sentence. Science is better than politics. You can maintain your view that you are extremely powerful just by repeating it, or having enough money, or convincing people around you. But in science, even Albert Einstein made mistakes. There is an arbitrator in science, which is the physical reality, which may not agree with you. You can have whatever ideas you want. You might think that you're...
It's the truth.
There is something independent of you. If you are orbiting the sun, you are not at the center of the universe. That's a fact. And you can find about it by taking data. Now, in politics, you can keep maintaining the view that you are at the center of the universe. In my view, science is better than politics because it keeps our sense of humility. There is something bigger than us. We are sometimes wrong. Let's learn. It's a learning experience. In politics, it's more about empowering your status than learning and remaining modest with a sense of humility. I think the approach of science, where you are wrong and you learn about what the reality is by collecting data, by having evidence, and that's a beautiful way of growing, because you are not subscribing to what you believed before. You are just learning something new every time you get better data. And there is eventually a way of realizing that you were wrong. That doesn't exist in politics as much. And that's why in politics you can have two separate claims that are very opposite to each other, and you have half of the country believing in one and half of the country believing in the other. So when you train AI systems on questions of politics, the correct representation of the answers should be, you can't really represent a political reality just with one peak somewhere in the middle, because it doesn't represent what people are thinking. If you have news outlets, they often subscribe to one of the peaks. Either they're on the left or on the right. You have different news outlets that compete for attention. But if you wanted to train an AI system to address political questions, it will have to maintain two peaks in the distribution to represent the reality. In science, you could have this as a temporary state of affairs. You can have people disagreeing, but eventually, once you have enough data, there is a convergence to a single peak. And that's why science is better than politics. A year ago, I was invited to the Munich Security Conference. I spoke about the work that I'm doing, and I realized that on the roof of the hotel, there were snipers with black head covers. They were there to protect dignitaries like Volodymyr Zelensky or Kamala Harris or heads of states. They were not there to protect me. And so the other benefit of doing science is that
Nobody's trying to shoot you.
I was going to say, tell that to Galileo or Kepler.
I was going to say, right?
A day later, after the Munich Security Conference, I was invited by the Polish government to give a public lecture celebrating 550 years to the birth of Nicolaus Copernicus. They actually gave me his book. My talk was about the next Copernican revolution, which is to say that we are not at the intellectual center of the universe.
I know you got to wrap up soon, Bill, but I have one more question.
My question is just going to blow the whole conversation open. So I will hold it for our next opportunity to talk. As I think about the exponential speed at which we are innovating, how does that also look at how our lifespans have grown so much? I think about my daughter and my father, 87 and 22, at the edges of those generations, what they have seen and what they are going to see as it continues to speed up. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think
particularly see in our politics too, right? If you
Yeah.
look at the most powerful people in a political space, they're all over 80 or close to 80.
But I think the real change in our future might be that we will live forever. Once you develop sufficiently intelligent AI systems, they would not solve all medical issues and find cure to all diseases, and we would potentially be able to repair the human body, just like you repair a car and replace its engine, treatments to a car so that people are still driving cars from the 60s. You could do that to humans in principle if you maintain longevity. That would be a much bigger impact on society than anything else. For one thing, tenure in academia will have to be abolished, because otherwise there won't
Or in
be
the
any
Senate.
job.
No, whatever.
Isn't it the ship of Theseus there, though?
I was just going to bring that up.
And
Right.
the question is, would you enjoy living forever? I mean, you would get much more experience. You'll get wiser after 100 years, after 1,000 years. And I think people will fight less because the risk of dying would be far more. Right now, if you die in a war, you shorten your life by a factor of a few. But in this case, it could be orders of magnitude, and you might not want to have any accidents.
And this,
What
is,
does
again,
insurance look like?
and I hate to rail on Elon Musk some more, but I'm going to anyway, because this is the thing that frustrates me, because he's putting zero energy into this idea of longevity. He actually is against it. He believes
But
that
he's trying to have a lot of kids. 11.
already got 9, right?
to buy shit.
11?
Well, that's another approach you just say, I want to maintain longevity of my DNA. But if we are able to live longer, it will not be needed to reproduce so much,
Right. And I just want to say one final thing on that matter, because there's something very important about what we've discovered with large language models, because we know the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Wisdom is knowledge applied. The fact that we have so much human knowledge built up throughout history and we have access to that now, the problem has been we have not had the ability to access that knowledge in frameworks that allow us to apply it, right? So taking that and using it, applying the scientific rigor to that, brings philosophy and science together in ways they haven't been before.
So on that, I would like to make two comments. One, I'm mostly worried about the analogs of the story of Socrates. He invented this method of a dialogue trying to figure out the truth. Eventually, he was punished by the Athenian court under the accusation that he corrupted the youth just by challenging the folklore at the time. And his struggle brought happiness to a lot of people since then, more than 2,400 years ago. I just worry that society suppresses innovation just because it looks different. That's why I haven't changed much since I was a baby. I really tried not to behave like the adult in the room. That's my approach. I also like challenges to the doctrine, the dogma, the big corporations that think they have all the power. I really believe that innovation could come from corners that we haven't explored yet, and we should allow kids or people that are open-minded without prejudice to explore those. So that's not just true in science, it's true also in technology.
And I was just going to say, to your point, that there's a difference between being childlike and childish.
Childlike is maintaining that open-mindedness.
Sense of wonder.
That sense of wonder is the positive.
Childish is the selfishness and the me.
Yeah,
but
philosophy comes with that.
Philosophy is all about acquiring knowledge. Okay, that's the real currency. It's not money, it's not social status, it's knowledge. And right now we have the tools of science. New knowledge doesn't fall into our lap. Elon was arguing that he doesn't have any evidence for alien technologies near Earth because the Starlink satellites never collided with an object. The Obviously, the Starlink satellites never detected the Higgs boson. They were not designed for the purpose. You have to invest time and money in developing the tools that would allow you to find the things that are difficult to detect. That's the whole point about science. You can't just find them by chance. When people say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, I don't think that imagining something like us under similar circumstances on exoplanets is extraordinary. I think it's very ordinary. It just requires evidence, like anything else. There is this dance that astrobiologists are doing right now. They are willing to invest more than $10 billion in the search for microbes on other planets, but they're not willing to discuss openly the search for intelligence out there. That is not a good way to hedge your bets, because detecting technological signatures could be much easier. If I find a gadget with buttons on it at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and it's not human-made, the only question that remains is whether to press a button.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
Without seeking the evidence, without putting time and effort to look for the evidence, without funding the search for evidence, you will never find it. So what I'm really worried about the current political system, not so much about some of the narratives that are being voiced, it's about the fact that it's driven by technologists from Silicon Valley who are not scientists. On the one hand, it can help the US get the edge in artificial intelligence worldwide, because there will be huge amounts of money. It would help get the US flag planted on Mars. But science is something different. Science could find us something we've never imagined. It will not be the American flag on Mars. It would be like discovering another civilization. That is far more exciting and uplifting. Going to Mars and will be taken out of the budget that was previously allocated to blue sky science. That would make me worried, because we would not maintain progress in our knowledge about our cosmic environment, which could be extremely important for the future of humanity, much more than showing to other nations that we humans got to Mars first on a SpaceX vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Avi, I know you're on a time crunch here, and I know you got to go. So I want to thank you dearly for your time. It is always a pleasure speaking with you. You always bring such great insight. And we truly believe that there is an opportunity here for the democratization of such innovation. And we truly believe that if it's concentrated in the hands of the few, then we're in big trouble. And so it's voices like yours that make the difference. The fact that you're out there educating people on these topics means the world to me. It means the world to us. I want to thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for the work that you do. I look forward to sharing this and to continue to educate about how we can take these technologies and put them into the hands of individual humans who can take their visions and their ideas and now have the actual capacity, because we're headed straight towards a massive disruption when it comes to so many different industries, layoffs, and people are going to be out of work. It's up to us today to be preparing for what that squeeze is going to look like. It's incredibly visionary to be looking into the stars for civilizations that have done this before. I also think that taking the practical scientific method and wisdom today and applying it to AI technology.
Just a few days ago, I had a Zoom call with a group of people who are constructing a new STEM education campus. It will be the biggest in the country. They wanted me to establish a Galileo project observatory on the campus in which the students will be engaged with collecting data and understanding the scientific method. This would be collecting state-of-the-art data on the sky without any prejudice, educating young adults that science is inspiring, that they can learn more than our politicians, is a very important mission. I will partner with them, and I think the future might be much better than the past, as long as we don't indoctrinate our young kids. We allow them to innovate, to deviate from what the senior people are saying, what the big corporations are saying. Let many flowers bloom. That's my approach.
I think we can do it, Avi. I look forward to finding new and innovative ways of collaborating with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to immediately tweet at Elon that he better get on it.
You have been challenged.
You have been shot. The gauntlet has been thrown. Avi, thank you so much for your time. How can people learn more about you? Where can they find you? Where would you like people to plug in to help and support you?
So every couple of days, I post an essay on medium.com. You can just look for it at Avi Loeb at medium.com, and it's free. I just wrote an essay about an hour ago. In addition, I had a TED Talk that was ranked number 5 in popularity among all 2024 TED Talks. There will be a Netflix documentary coming out within a year. They came with me to the expedition to the Pacific Ocean, where we looked for fragments in the region where the first interstellar meteor crashed about a decade ago. We were looking for any relics of that meteor to figure out whether there was a filming crew with me, and the documentary will come out within a year. In addition, I should tell you there are lots of things happening. Like in a week, I will be getting a donation of a sculpture named Galileo looking at the 4 moons of Jupiter, given to me by someone defined as America's Rodin. He is a very accomplished sculptor, Greg Wyatt. He just gave me a bronze sculpture that will be placed at my office. I will charge admission fees from now on. Lots of things are happening, some of which you will hear about during the summer of 2025. So stay tuned.
Okay, fantastic. We'd love to have you back and discuss those as they come out. Yeah. One of the things that we're working on here at Brevetto is democratizing access to people who have brilliant philosophies and frameworks. And so, like, I know somebody has approached you in the past about an Avi agent, but I might be reaching out to you.
There is actually a company that trained an AI system on my writings and the videos of my interviews. I told them that if it looks good, that will save me a lot of time, because I can let this system appear on podcasts instead of me. I can then continue to do my creative work.
So you're telling me that you've just been an AI agent this whole time?
Is that something that's publicly available? Can we check that out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they went public as of yet. I can email you the name once
I would love that. I'd love to check that out. Yeah, that'd be fantastic, because we're putting
always great to talk to you, Avi.
They selected a number of well-known people, so it's not just me. But I'll give you the link.
We don't want to talk to the other ones.
Yeah, I was definitely a real person. You can ask me personal questions. I'll answer them.
Thank you so much, Avi. And very much look forward to it. And I'll reach out to you for that email, because I'd love to connect. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.